Hey everybody, it's Deborah, and I have another watercolor project for us today. We're going to be painting a quick and colorful Dutch iris. We're going to be using a fairly limited palette, but just by using different values of the same hues, we'll be able to give this gorgeous flower some fabulous glow. So let's get started on this project. Thanks for joining me here today. If you like this video, hit that like button and please subscribe to my channel. And share this with your friends. I'd love to hear your comments on anything else you'd like to see me paint in the future. So let's get started with this Dutch iris today. So we're going to get started on our Dutch iris today, and so here are some of the colors I've put out. Permanent violet, French ultramarine blue, this is cad yellow light, green gold, olive green, hooker's green. This is a little bit of Windsor violet, just in case we need to pump things up. And then this is a combination of my French ultramarine, my green gold, a little bit of olive, and the hookers. So it's just making that combination of colors that will give you a darker green. And you may have your own combination that you like to put together, but I usually have used this, and sometimes I do put a little bit of indigo to make it dark. And I want to make a combo of my French ultramarine and my violet here. And I want enough of the ultramarine in there to give me that texture. And that looks like a nice combination. I'm going to start over on this edge, and I may want a little more violet in there. Now I want to be careful to make sure this stays wet as I work my way around so that I will get a nice smooth transition. I'm bringing that down. I'm using a number 8 Royal and Langnickel brush, and it's got a great point, so usually works out well. So I'm going to go into my French ultramarine now and bring that to the other half of this petal. So I want to show that transition of color. I can start putting that color down. And this is how I generally like to do my blending. Filling in both sides and then bringing those together. So I do want to be careful that it's permanent violet, so I don't want to get a hard line, and it's starting to dry. So once again, I am working on this Arches bright white paper. I felt it would work well for this piece since there's not a lot of glazing. We might do a little, but not a tremendous amount. And then maybe I want this a little bit lighter on this edge. I'm going to just drop some water in there and just move that. I can also lift a little. And that looks pretty good. Now, we'll just move over to this petal, and I want to keep it fairly light here. So I'm just going to start with my ultramarine. And now I'm going to just take some water. Just adding some water right into that. Ultramarine, French ultramarine. You can see it's already starting to settle out, getting that grainy texture that makes it so interesting. And looking at that, I think I want to lift just a little bit more over here because I want this to be just a little bit lighter. But I'm trying to avoid any blooms if possible. And I can also show you how to fix those if we do get any. And so now I'm going to take some of my permanent violet on this edge of the petal. Getting a little more pigment. So this is a little bit more graphically painted. We're not going for realism here. That looks like a nice blending of color. Maybe just a little lighter on that edge. Now I want to go in and do some of the yellow areas on the petals. I'm going to just turn my paper to the side, see if I can get this in here. And this is a cadmium, so it does tend to be a little bit more opaque. I'm lifting a little just to get a little highlight, perhaps, and then I can go over to this area. So there's not a lot of yellow on here, just the center of these petals. And I'm going to once again turn my paper so I have better access to this side. And then one more area here. That's about all the yellow there is in our painting today. So while that's wet, we can go in with a little bit of our green gold and bring it right into the base of those little bits of yellow. And I may take just a little bit of my olive as well and drop that into that area that's just a little bit more in shadow. So let's move on down to a few of these leaves. So I'm going to be going right into that dark color that I mixed. I'm going to take some of my olive and start to transition that and I might drop just a little bit of my green gold into that edge, and I'm going to be going back to the dark color here at the base where it would be also a little more in shadow. And again, I'm working this while everything is wet, so everything blends. and that came out great. So let's go ahead and continue that leaf. Once again, I'll just turn my paper so I can have better access, and I'm always resting my hand on the table. And you know, some people wear gloves when they do this, or you could put down a piece of tracing paper or tissue paper so you're not putting your hand directly on your paper and getting some of the natural oils from your skin in there. And again, I'm going to make that transition from that dark down to my olive, up to my olive. And then just a little, again, of my green gold. And I'll bring that all the way to the tip. I'm going to, again, turn my paper so I can get directly onto this petal here. And I'm making that mixture of the permanent violet and French ultramarine. And these are fairly dark, so I may be dropping a little more pigment in after I get this color down, this initial color. And I do want to make sure, again, that I have enough of that gorgeous ultramarine to see the settling out of that pigment. Dropping more of the violet in here and going around this curve. Just a little bit more violet. And I want that, again, to be fairly dark. Any painting, I think it's a good idea to work out what colors you are considering using. And that's why I always do a little color sample. And I recommend doing that with all your colors so that you have a sense of what you actually have in your paint box. Now this is pretty wet, so I just want to make sure I don't have too much moisture on there. Our way further down, I'm going to go into this petal. Start with my violet at the base. So I'm trying to get a little bit more pigment rather than water on here. And I'm going to be going into the ultramarine, so a little combination of both of those colors. Getting a little bit lighter as I work my way over to the tip of this. And again, I feel like I need a little more dense pigment at the base. Getting a little too much. So I'm going to just charge some more color in there. So I'm just putting some water to blend here. And I'm going to go a little bit bluer at at the top. So again, just charging in a little more paint on that edge, and then spreading that around with the wet brush. And I think we can work down here on more of these leaves. So we can start to get into these petals at the top. So I'm going right into my ultramarine. I'm just going to bring some water into this edge. And I'm going to be using, again, the ultramarine. And a little bit of the violet at the tip here. And you can see the nice gradations that we're getting in our petals. I'm going to go right into the base of the stem, and we'll work on these areas later. So again, I need my deeper color. And mixing color is, it's a balance. It's a back and forth. It's like maybe you need to add more blue, maybe you need to add more green. But it's just something that comes with practice. And it's going to be, again, in shadow behind this leaf coming up. I want to make sure this is not going to dry on me before I get back to it. So what I think I'll do is just charge in a little more color along this edge. And I'm going to go ahead and take some of my olive with a little bit of green gold and put that in the center here. So I want to show a little bit of a highlight. Dropping a little more of the green gold. I want to keep this paint moving. And I think maybe I'll just drop a little bit of water in here and let it move that paint while I finish up the base of the stem. Combo of my ultramarine and my permanent violet. I'm watering it down a little. Now it can be just a little bit lighter on this edge. I'm going to make it darker here because I had a little overlap. But now I'll take some water, pull that over, maybe put the water away from it and pull those together. Just start to bring that down. Because in here it could be a little darker as we get down towards the base. And this one's fairly light. Again, I'm using that combination. And I think at the top here I'll just add a little bit of ultramarine. And I want to drop some water in here. Again, I want to make sure it has some place to go, so I'm going to moisten this whole area so I don't get any blooms. And then we can go into this petal over here that's the same deep dark color. I'm going to take a little extra ultramarine on this edge over here. So just varying the color and the value can just make everything so interesting, even when you're not using a lot of colors, a fairly limited palette we have here today. We can finish up this leaf at the bottom. So it's fairly light here at the top. I've got a little combination of my green gold and my olive. Pulling that down. Might make it a little bit darker here. And then I'll also bring a little of the darker green mixture along this edge while it's wet. We can work on these other petals in here now in the center that are ready to be filled in. And I'm going to be making this one petal very, very light. So I'm going to turn my paper once again. And again, what I'm doing here is I'm showing that contrast. I can leave it a little bit deeper at the base and the top, little highlight in the center. And now we just have a few more petals to do. There's a tiny one in here and then this area. Perhaps we can do this little turn, so let's stay with our ultramarine. I'll have a little bit of violet in there. But this should be pretty light, so I'm going to be wanting to take a damp brush and lift some of that. Turn my paper and use the deep color here that I've mixed up. And then go to my olive. But those transitions are what watercolor is all about. The transparency and the translucence, it just glows. Do these base leaves now. There's a little turn here that I see I forgot to include, so I'm going to add it in now using my lighter color. There's a little combo here with my green gold. And I want to pull that down a little deeper. And then I'm going to go back to my darker color for the tip. And I'm going to go ahead and fill that in with a very light wash of my ultramarine. Whoop. I'll do the same on this edge. I'm getting a medium green so it stands away from that center stem, but also is a little darker next to the outside edge here. Work in our dark color as we go up towards the flower. And then I'll go back to my lighter color. And we only have one small section to finish. And I'm going to start with my green gold. Which doesn't look very green gold, so I'm getting a little bit more there. And the other side can be more dark green. Dropping a little more of the dark up here. And we are just about complete. Let's just do the rest of this leaf here. So in the center, I'm going to make this a little darker. I'm going across with some lighter color, kind of defining the center of that leaf. And then we can just do this last bit down here. Making that a little greener against the deep color down the center, and we'll just pull that to the bottom. So, just a quick little exercise in color and contrast, and I hope you enjoyed that. So we just have a couple of tiny areas around our flower bud that need to be made a little darker. Just a tiny little space in here. We can call it finished.